Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to call to order our meeting of our Fiscal Committee for Tuesday, July 3rd, and welcome everybody that we have here at Carnegie Town Hall and everybody watching on Channel 16 or streaming over the internet. Just a reminder, if anybody's here to sign in by the door, we have a sign-in, so we'd like to keep track of who all our guests are at the meeting. Call our meeting to order and ask for approval of our minutes.
So moved, Aguilar.
Second, Jamison.
We have a first and a second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All righty. Today we have 3 agenda items. The first will be on the development of citywide fees, including park department fees, and I believe we have Mr. Oaksel, our lead internal auditor, to discuss the progress on this. We also have a few other staff present for discussion on this, so we'll start with Mr. Oaksel.
Good afternoon, committee. I do have hard copies of that audit report if you need them. It's already been presented to the City Council, but I do have. But anyway, a very short report. We just had 3 recommendations. We looked at the citywide fees, and we recommended we have a citywide policy. That was a best practice of the GFOA, Government Finance Officers Association. The other recommendation, number 2, was to consolidate all the fees in ordinance under one chapter. Currently, they're sort of scattered throughout the various ordinances, the various chapters. And then the third recommendation that we have some sort of way for the citizens to find the fees easily on the city website. Some cities will have a master fee schedule on the city website that you can access easily. Others will have some sort of drop-down menu or a search function where you can easily find a city fee for whatever you're interested in. So I think we have a number of people ready to address some of these recommendations. So I think I'll just sit down and let other people talk unless you have a question right now. So, okay, thank you.
Okay, I know David Fifley, our city attorney, was going to talk about the recodification into one place.
Yes, Councilor Karski, I'm here for Mr. Fifley today, and the recodification process that the city is going through now that has to occur, I believe it's every 10 years, where our ordinances are recodified. During that process, our publishing company is placing all city fees into one chapter. And then, hopefully that will make it easier for citizens to locate the specific fees they're interested in. But as well, the IT department is going to be creating a website page then with those same fees with links, I believe, to the places in the ordinances where the fee is established.
Okay. And Sue Quanback from our Central Services Director is here. And Sue, a question comes to mind. Logistically, are we able to get all this done? So if there's a fee for licensing your dog, it'll take you can click on that and take you right to the dog ordinances or whatever the case may be?
Yes, that should be no problem whatsoever. What I'm kind of envisioning is that we'd have a web page, titled, the city fees, or something like that in terms of the verbiage, whatever people want it to be. And then just kind of a listing, probably in alphabetical order or whatever people want, parking fees, permit fees, whatever those fees are. And then next to the label, we'd have a link, and it would bring you right there. I understand from Karen that it's going to be in one chapter. And to us, it doesn't even matter where they are because we'll just link to it and go directly to whatever that fee is, wherever it is in the codified law. So we'll be linking directly to American Legal. We already do that today on our website, so that should be no problem.
Sounds good. Questions?
So does that mean then that we'll probably take and wait until the codification is probably done and then do the work on the website at that point in time? Would that be a recommendation that we would possibly wait for that? So then sometime after the first of the year, we should be able to start to work on this then?
That was my understanding, that it was going to wait for the recodification to be finished before the website, I think, was going out.
It would definitely be the most efficient way to do it. If it's in other chapters right now, and if someone can tell us where everything is, I mean, we could develop the page ahead of time, but we could be working on the format right now. And it will be a very easy task for us to complete.
Councilor Jameson?
Sue, thanks for being here. Do I understand this right? You're saying that the process of creating all the links would not be a problem?
It would not be a problem.
Because I get the efficiency part of waiting for sure, but if indeed the process isn't as cumbersome as it would be for a guy like me, then maybe having it done sooner is better than waiting until January 1st. But if it's a hassle, I get it, the efficiency of waiting, but.
That'd be my concern, the efficiency of waiting. Should we do it now? Should we wait till the codification is over with, and then we have one fell swoop, then we can get it all done at one time instead of having to go back and do it the second time?
I guess, Gail, I don't know in terms of the timeline. I mean, I don't know where things are at today and, what I could be reviewing right now.
And I really can't speak to that either. Karen Leonard is the attorney that's addressing it, but I'd be very happy to go back to her and Mr. Fifely to see if there is a way to speed it up.
And I'd be happy to meet with them as well and just sit down and talk about it and see. I've got to think that they know where things are now and where they will land and could provide me with that information, in which case we could start work right away. But I'd be happy to meet with the city attorneys.
Councilor Enman?
Maybe that might be worthwhile if you had an opportunity to meet with the city attorneys, and then you can just give us a timeline, establish us a timeline about what we might be expecting when the codification is all going to be done. We'll have that all approved, and then what the possible timeline would be to get this all on, get the formatted, and then get it up on the website. I think that would be very beneficial for us.
I'd be happy to do that.
And then come back to us and maybe give us that presentation at another meeting here in 30 days or whenever we can get it scheduled in.
Okay. Any other questions or suggestions? So we'll just stay tuned till next month, I guess.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much, Sue.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I believe because of budget hearings, we won't be having committee meetings until September.
Well, that was one of my items for tonight. We were looking at moving our fiscal committee meeting. So can we have the discussion at the end during open discussion? Thank you very much. Jim David, our legislative and operations manager, you have anything to add to the process?
Yes. I had sent out a survey to all the city directors, basically gauging their opinion if they believed in the ability to classify the fees and into putting them into separate categories based on the ability for them to recoup their costs. For example, you would have in category 1 maybe the city pools that would recoup about 10% of their costs, whereas the enterprise funds would recoup 100% maybe in category 5. I did receive a joint response from all the city directors, and they had some general support for the following 2 items. They believe in developing a guideline for the frequency of review for fee amounts and establishing the goals for the level of cost recovery associated with various fees. There was concern with doing an all-encompassing strategy with all the fees, and they thought maybe just identifying certain fees at the onset to maybe see how that worked first before doing anything larger. But they wanted to make sure that we did engage them into this process, through the entire process. So.
Questions?
Could you repeat that again for me? Exactly what did they say they wanted to do? I think what we're looking at is just trying to make it easier for the citizens to get on board and take a look at what are the actual fees.
This is a little bit different. Another part of Rich's report was dealing with categorizing all the city fees into 5 or 6 different categories, and going into each category and developing a strategy for increasing those for maybe category 1 would be increased every 5 years because that would deal with the city parks, whereas the enterprise fees would be in category 5 and they might be updated every 2 years for possible increases. And so that was the survey that went out to each of those directors if they supported that type of an idea.
And if I could,
Recommendation 2 was the recodification. Recommendation 3 was the website. The first recommendation was the citywide fee policy. And I think the direction was to survey the directors on that first recommendations.
from our audit committee, we have no policy regarding fees, and was one of the directions of going forward with this. So, I mean, if we're looking at, is January correct on the date that we're looking for implementation? I think we have time to work on this, but let's keep the wheels turning on it. So, I don't see any need for action at this point. Any other questions or input? Seeing none, we'll just wait till next month and we'll have a follow-up report. Next agenda item is the discussion on creation of the Capital Program Review Committee. And if I could start on this, Councilor Greg Jamieson, myself, Tracy Turback, we had people from planning and our staff. We met for almost 2 hours this afternoon to discuss and really try to come to terms on where we're going with having a Capital Program Review Committee, the necessity of it, what information we're looking at. And I know I gained a lot of insight out of this afternoon, and it's an ongoing process, and I'm sure Councilor Jamieson has information he'd like to add to this. Not to put you on the spot.
Well, maybe just to give some background information to make sure we're all kind of up to the same spot, is that remember our initial goal was to figure out how do we manage the process of surplus funds, you know, the 4 million, the 3 million, whatever it is left over in the CIP budget. How do we handle that? And through that research, we figured out that there was a review committee, and then that threw us off into another curve of it's in the ordinance and other places that there's a review committee, CIP review committee, but it actually isn't. And then the discussion turned to, do we believe as a group that having a review committee is an important function? And we had heard the word yes and nods, and so Councilor Karski and myself continued on that path of formulating some of those revisions to the ordinance of exactly how the CIP is delivered to us. Through that process, we incorporated the executive order that was previously in place. And there was a lot of language that was backwards because it gave a lot of authority to the administration, and the council wanted to be a part of this. So anyway, we've been going through and trying to clean up this language, and we did a lot of work today with some great input from the staff to make it clearer and cleaner. And but there are two pieces I think if we could at least have some semblance of a discussion about would be the process of when this committee would review the budget. It's a big sticking point between us on, you know, as it goes right now, the mayor presents his budget. We have our sessions where the departments come in and present their budgets. And then we make our amendments and changes if we want. This review committee would be in front of, at least our intention, to be in front of the budget actually being printed. So this committee would actually be involved in its final preparation. Now, the mayor certainly has the authority to go and print the budget as he sees fit, and that's his responsibility, in fact, to do it as he sees fit. What we're after and we're hoping for is this review committee to have their fingerprints on it, essentially, before it gets to him or to that office, or the mayor's office, and hopefully the mayor takes that directive as a positive input. But either way, it's up to the mayor to decide. So the decision is, do we want to have this review committee look at it before we ever get it, or is it something we would want them to review after we get it? It gets a little dicey about who's pushing what and who's in charge and who has the final say. Certainly, in the process, we have for instance, the park board could come forward and say, we support this plan completely. But we, in the past, have not, I think, in a clear setting said, was this the proposal you brought forward as a park board? I mean, we've never really even asked that. And maybe that's just what we need to do, is ask that. But, so there's a sticking point about when this review committee would be involved. And then the other part is, should this review committee lay out the next items that should be funded if there were surplus funds? And that's the goal that we were initially after, was that part. Should this review committee lay out, here's the next items in the budget that should be funded according to the vision and the planning that we've put into it. And that recommendation would then come to the council, and then just like we just went through the process, we would probably say yes or no, or with some revisions, we could make those. But those are the two, probably the biggest sticking points, is when would the review committee see it, before or after it's printed, and as far as the recommendations on the surplus funds.
Thank you, Councilor Jameson. Councilor Enneman.
A couple of questions that I might have on this would be, as far as the CIP review committee that you're talking about, Councilor Jameson, how would that be made up? Are you talking just who's going to be on that committee?
Well, right now, that's a perfect item in the details. Right now, it would be made up of, see if I can get this part right, the 4 members, Public Works, the Finance Department, I'm sorry, it'll be just, the directors shall represent Planning and Building Services, Parks and Recreation, Public Works, and Finance. So a director from each of those departments would be on that. And then 4 others would come from the Infrastructure Review Advisory Board, the Park Recreation Board, the Planning Commission, and then 1 citizen from the Sioux Falls Development Foundation or the Chamber of Commerce.
If I might, I guess the question I have here is, why? It seems to me that if the mayor brings forward his budget, which is he is obligated to do, and he does this in conjunction and discussion with the department directors. The Parks Board, for example, does have, or I should say Don Kearney and the Parks Department, they do have a board, an advisory board that they go to, and they talk about what the needs in their plan are and different things like this. And they have the same thing when they discuss the streets and different things like that. And you're talking, part of the membership are these specific public directors. So the mayor presents his budget like he does now. And it would seem to me then that we as councilors, during the discussion when we ask the department directors to come in, that we ask the directors to come in, and then if we would have some of their questions, we should, as the people that have to approve the budget, and it's our responsibility to do that, we should take the responsibility to do that and not pass it on to another committee, of which I'm not going to be a member. And I'm elected by the citizens to be part of, to be responsible for deciding on this budget. I believe it's our responsibility then to make sure that we ask the right questions during the hearings that we have based on what the mayor's budget is. Now that's the budget side of it. The CIP portion of it, for example, when we have the budget surpluses that we had, Councilor Jameson, the process that you started last year, and I know we had some trials and tribulations trying to get going on it. I know you worked really, really hard. I liked the way that it ended up. We got into it this year. We had a lot of questions, but ultimately we ended up sitting and we talked about it during a working session. And we had a lot of discussion of whether we just keep the reserve amount, do we spread it out, where do we apply it? And I think as the discussion of the body as a whole during our working session, I think that we really came up with a good suggestion, and it was a little bit of work for us. There's no doubt about it. But quite honestly, I question whether or not we need to have a committee before any kind of process even takes place where the mayor presents his budget to us. I'm not willing to, myself, to give up what I'm elected to do by asking those questions once they get in. And it is the professionals that give us the information of how they want us to spend the money. And then we need to just work through that to decide if we need to do that. And I don't know that we need another committee to do it.
Thank you, Councilor Enneman, and I guess I have a little bit of input on that. Like I said, we did spend a lot of time today discussing the entire budgeting process, and how that CIP does come to us, who it goes through, and the number of hands that are on it, the eyes that see it, and so on and so forth. And I agree with you, we don't need to legislate by committee. And that's not the purpose of what Councilor Jameson and I are trying to accomplish here with doing this. We just want to make sure that any budget that comes before us as a council goes through all those eyes and ears so that when we look at it, I'm not an expert on what streets need to be done. I'm not a developer that knows which projects are going in. I just want to know that all those things have been heard and looked at. And I think that, and Councilor Jameson can correct me if I'm wrong, that was the whole purpose of doing what we're doing.
Right, if I could, I just want to be crystal clear that we are not delegating any authority from the council. Just first and foremost, so you know that. All we're looking for is a group of people who come from sections of our community, from the Planning Commission, Parks Board, Infrastructure Review Board, all these groups who are visionaries for our community, the Chamber, the Development Foundation, those people with a bigger vision of our community look at this plan. Even if it's like this, the draft form is printed and the mayor shows it to them and says, what do you guys think of this vision I have for the city? And this board comes together, this review committee comes together and says, you know what? This is great. We love this. This meets everything we're thinking about over here in the chamber, everything we're thinking about in the Development Foundation. The IRAB board says, hey, it works for us. Now, even if this has occurred, wouldn't it be great for us to know that when we get the budget? Now we have this confidence about this plan and this proposal because more eyes have seen this vision than just some people. That's the focus.
Thank you, Councilor Jameson. I'm going to go over to Councilor Aguilar right now.
Well, I guess I have a couple questions. Is it not in the current ordinance, the timeline for the review?
Yeah, that is part of the stickler problem here, is that it's referred to, this committee is referred to in the current ordinance, and there is no review committee.
And then I guess I have a question for the city attorney, the assistant city attorney, as far as, doesn't ordinance supersede an executive order or not? I mean, I thought that executive orders only dealt with staff issues or pertain to staff.
Right.
Well, executive orders are a procedure used for the administration to run the operation of the city as far as its internal matters, such as employee issues, our drug and alcohol testing policy. Executive orders are sort of administrative rules to run the administration, whereas ordinances are legislation, policy decisions made by the city council that are law.
So I don't understand how an executive order could have ended the work of this review committee if it was in ordinance. I guess I don't see why we're not following the ordinance, which is the law of the city.
Well, it's my understanding that an executive order created this review committee, and it was later abolished by executive order, and somehow a reference to it got put in the ordinance. But it's my understanding an ordinance did not create the committee. It was created by executive order.
So the council never passed an ordinance creating this?
Not what I would say created it. It references it in the purchasing ordinances.
Okay.
And that's where a lot of our problems are coming in, and that's why this was brought up, because when the plan is submitted, it specifically says that it's been reviewed by the CIP committee. And there is no committee, but in ordinance, it references that it has been. So chicken and the egg, what comes first? And that's what Councilor Jameson and I have been working with the Director of Finance, and Public Works, trying to figure out what's the best way for us to proceed with this. Councilor Enneman.
Councilor Jameson, you, in your description, which sounds good, you stated, why not another set of eyes to look at it and say, yeah, this looks great. Well, then the question would come up is that it seems to me then if this review committee then says, no, we don't agree with you, Mr. Mayor, then it seems like, okay, so what does that mean then? Does that mean we start the process all over, but that's set by ordinance? Is it just creating more fodder for the press, controversy out there that we can build another story on? Or how is it to be handled then if this committee says, since it has no real power and the mayor can come up and give his own thing anyway, according to what you said, he doesn't have to follow this process at this point in time. So I guess to your point, there seems to be an awful lot of questions here and nobody has an idea. I'm just concerned that the process that we're looking at, while it might sound good, it might be a deterrent to what we're trying to actually get done. And do we need all of this stuff, or is it the responsibility of the mayor, along with the input of his professionals, just to bring us the budget? We review the budget. And if it makes sense to us during our discovery sessions that we have, during our work sessions and everything that we have, and we seem to spend an awful lot of time on that. The question we have is, I think, is important, and I think we did a good job, although I think we need to formalize that a little bit, is dealing with that reserve amount or that surplus amount that we had at the end of the budget year.
Councilor Aguilar.
I guess I always looked at this review committee in the same light as I look at the Planning Commission. We don't always follow their recommendations, but they make recommendations that do assist us in the process, since not only policy but budget is the main responsibility of this council. I would see that if we're going to have a review committee, yes, the mayor can decide that he doesn't agree with them, but I would see that the council would get that report back, and it would be something that would be information that we would use in approving the CIP budget. I guess I don't look at it as just adding another committee. I think I look at it as a way for the council to enhance the job that they're doing.
Other questions or input? Councilor Jameson.
Yeah, I think the fundamental question, I suppose, is whether or not we see it as a value to have further input from anybody else. I mean, we can eliminate this whole discussion on that fundamental question there. If we feel like it's good and what we've got is fine, and we certainly always, this is something I probably forgot, is that we have the ability to ask these people, these same groups, the Park Board, the Infrastructure Review Board, the Planning Commission, the Development Foundation, the Chamber, to come forward and say, how do you feel about this, afterwards. We have that, and I don't think we probably do a good job of calling them on the carpet, so to speak, and asking them to participate. But there is something we did learn in this process, is that the administration does quite an effort of engaging these other groups to participate in the discussion up to the submission of the budget to us. And perhaps, as we discussed earlier, is that it's really a communication problem, and that they really haven't done an effective job telling us, the administration, of telling us that, look, we engaged all these groups, and here's their feedback. Here's when we met with them. Here's their feedback. Here's how I incorporated their comments or feelings into this budget, and see how this works. I mean, just even that story right there would be a great confidence builder to us when we look at this capital plan. I mean, the capital plan as we see it is just black and white numbers on pages. And we don't have that big picture vision feel that sometimes is missing. And I know the mayor tried to present that to us the other day, but so the fundamental question is, do we want others to look at it? I guess I see those other groups as very valuable resources to this body, and I value their opinion.
And I would add to it that Unfortunately, the budget process is somewhat of a political process, and by having this committee, I guess having the input is extremely important. Where we're at right now with it is we've made a lot of progress today, meeting with Director Turbach. We were able to iron out a lot of differences. Now we're down to kind of the semantics of different parts of what we're looking at, and I think we're going to continue down that process. And when we, or if we ever eventually come to an agreement on something that we want to bring to this committee as a whole to decide if we want to pass it on to the entire council, that's the direction we'll take. So, any other questions or input into this? Okay. We had, as item C, Councilor Staggers had asked that we determine a process or procedure for reassigning excess funds, and he had asked that we move this to next month's agenda. And speaking of next month's agenda, here it is. We do have a meeting scheduled for Tuesday, the budget address on Tuesday, August 7th, a fairly long meeting, and I would like to ask the Fiscal Committee if they would like to move our meeting to Monday, as the Land Use Committee meeting is doing the previous week, or the week before this one, Monday, August 6th at 4:00 p.m.
What is it that we have that's burning on the agenda that we need to?
Well, at this time, we already talked about the fee schedule. I mean, we've got till January, basically, before we have to move anything really forward with that, with recodification, the way it sounds. So we're probably okay with that. If Councilor Staggers is okay with waiting for his agenda item, there's nothing that we're looking at excess funds, so we wouldn't have anything there, presumably until next spring, so we would have time to discuss that. And our Capital Program Review Committee, there's nothing burning there either, so I mean, that's a work in progress. So if we have nothing to put on the agenda that I'm aware of, I think everything can be delayed.
I like the idea of not scheduling it. Just saying.
I would agree, because we have so many budget hearings in August, and that is really what we need to, if Councilor Staggers would be willing for his item to wait until the first Tuesday in September, I would see that his would be the only item that we're deferring today, that we could, go without a meeting in August.
Councilor Staggers, a simple nod of your head. Are you okay with? Okay, so we will then have no meeting for August of the Fiscal Committee. Open discussion. Any topics for open discussion? Well, seeing none from the rest of the committee, I do have one. We have before us next week 3 different resolutions regarding our pension plan changes. I hope you've all had time to look at them. Now would be a good time to discuss any questions or concerns regarding this proposed resolutions. We have 3 different ones coming before us next week. Any input? Okay. Sounds real fine then. Seeing no other topics, we will call our Fiscal Committee meeting adjourned.